The notification sound was Mia Russo's favourite noise in the world. That soft, digital chime that meant someone had just joined her live stream. It rang approximately 40 times in the span of a single minute as she rounded the corner onto West 47th Street, her phone gimbal balanced in one hand and an iced matcha in the other. Because content creation required both caffeine and coordination. Okay, we are officially at 30,000 concurrent viewers, she announced to the camera, her dark eyes crinkling at the corners, the way they always did when she was genuinely delighted, rather than performing delight. A distinction her audience of 4.2 million had long since learned to recognize. You guys are absolutely insane, and I love every single one of you. Someone in the comments just said, Mia, you walk too fast. And honestly, that's my villain arc. Walking fast in New York City. Lock me up. She tilted the camera to catch the Manhattan skyline at the particular gold and purple hour she called the city's main character lighting, the kind that made every building look like the establishing shot of something important. She was right about that, at least. Something important was happening. She just didn't know it yet. The channel was called Real Time with Mia, and the premise was exactly what it sounded like. Unscripted, unedited, live footage of Mia doing things. Going to the farmer's market, reviewing ramen at midnight, attempting yoga in Central Park while pigeons judged her. 3 years ago, she'd been a 23-year-old with a journalism degree she wasn't using, and an aunt who let her crash in a Hell's Kitchen studio. Now she had a penthouse apartment in the West Village, rented, not owned, because she was an influencer, not a hedge fund manager. A brand deal with an oat milk company that paid better than most salaried jobs, and a comment section that had developed its own internal mythology. The regular viewers had names for her recurring cast. There was Coffee Cart Carlos, a vendor she visited so frequently that his cart had become a recurring location. There was Concerned Citizen Karen, a neighbour who appeared intermittently to disapprove of filming on the sidewalk. And there was a newer addition to the mythology, someone who had appeared in her donation feed approximately 6 weeks ago. Ghost King_official. Ghost King had first appeared with a $500 super chat during a particularly chaotic episode where Mia had accidentally joined a flash mob. He'd written, "Try to stay out of trouble. You won't." The comment had gotten so many replies that it generated its own subthread, and her audience had collectively decided Ghost King was either a tech billionaire, a retired spy, or both. He had no public social media presence. His profile photo was a black square. He donated with the casual frequency of someone who spent money the way other people breathed, automatically and without apparent effort. Mia thought he was probably a lonely middle-aged man with too much crypto, and she found him endearing. She had no idea how wrong she was. "Taking a shortcut," she announced, swinging the camera left to film the entrance of an alley she'd taken 100 times. The city was full of them, narrow channels between buildings that smelled like restaurant exhaust and looked like film noirs waiting to happen. This one ran between a Thai restaurant and a parking structure, and it shaved 4 minutes off the walk to her favourite bookshop. I know. The comments section is already typing, "Mia, don't go in the alley." I can feel it. But I have taken this alley literally 100 times, and nothing has ever... She stopped walking. At the far end of the alley, half obscured by the shadow of the parking structure, 3 men in expensive suits were standing around an open briefcase. This alone was not remarkable. This was Manhattan. What was remarkable was the fourth man, kneeling on the ground, and the particular quality of stillness in the scene that the body recognized before the mind caught up. Mia's thumb, by pure instinct developed through 3 years of content creation, tilted the gimbal toward the scene. The phone's camera, a flagship model with genuinely excellent low-light performance, a detail she had praised extensively in a sponsored post 3 months ago, caught it all. The briefcase with its stacked interior, the men's faces partially lit by the amber glow of a single parking structure bulb, the emblem on the lapel of the tallest man's jacket, a stylized crown, small enough to miss if you weren't looking, but her camera's 4K resolution was not in the habit of missing things. She became aware of 30,000 people watching this with her. "Okay," she said very quietly, in the voice she used when she needed to communicate information to her audience without communicating it to the people currently 20 meters away from her. "We are going to take a different shortcut." She backed up slowly. The matcha trembled in her hand. She kept the camera steady, professional, even now, and turned, very casually, and walked in the opposite direction at a pace she would later describe in therapy as what I call my don't run but definitely run speed. The men in the alley had not looked up. This was the moment Mia Russo entered the orbit of Dominic Voss, though she would not learn his name for another 2 weeks, and she would not learn what he was for considerably longer than that. In a high-rise 43 blocks north, a room full of men in dark suits were about to learn that an influencer with 30,000 concurrent viewers and a very good phone camera had just filmed something she absolutely should not have filmed. The room had no windows. This was intentional. The 43rd floor of the Voss Tower offered panoramic views of Manhattan in every direction. Dominic knew this because he had designed the building himself, down to the floor-to-ceiling glass that made the executive suites feel like observation decks perched above the city's breathing skyline. He had placed this particular room, officially designated Conference Suite D on the building directory, listed as a data security auditing room in the corporate org chart, and known to exactly 11 people by its actual function, in the building's interior core, specifically so it had no views of anything. What it had instead was screens. 16 of them, arranged in 2 rows of 8 along the north wall, each one displaying a different feed. Markets, social platforms, dark web monitoring channels, location data, communication intercepts, and in the center of the top row, larger than the rest, a live stream from a channel called Real Time with Mia, currently mid-broadcast, currently showing approximately 31,000 viewers watching a young woman in a sage green jacket hurry out of an alley in Midtown. Dominic Voss was looking at that screen with the focused, unhurried attention of a man who had made a career out of being the calmest person in any given crisis. He was 36 years old and looked it in the way that certain men look their age, not worn by it, but sharpened, the way good steel is. His face was the kind that photographers described as architectural in profiles he didn't give interviews for. His suits cost more than most people's cars. His background, per his official biography, MIT. 2 graduate degrees, tech entrepreneur, Forbes 40 under 40 at 31. Currently the CEO of Voss Tech, a conglomerate with holdings in cloud infrastructure, payment processing, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. The unofficial biography was considerably more interesting. "Tell me what she has," he said. His voice was quiet in the way that rooms went quiet for, not loud but carrying, the kind of voice that had learned very early that it never needed to compete for attention. Marco Caretti, his head of digital operations, and the man who had been the first to see the clip, pulled up a freeze frame on the center screen. She streamed live for approximately 12 seconds before backing out of the visual range. The camera caught Fontana, Ricci, and the Marchetti package exchange. The crown emblem on Fontana's jacket is visible at timestamp 4:23. High def. Very high def. How many people saw it live? 31,000, give or take. But it's the VOD that's the problem. Live stream replays automatically. She has 4.2 million subscribers. The clip has been out for, Marco checked his watch, 22 minutes. We've already counted 47 screen recordings uploaded to external platforms. The room had the particular quality of held breath that Dominic recognized as his team managing their own panic on his behalf. He appreciated the effort. He did not share the panic. He looked at the freeze frame. The girl, he refused to think of her as a girl. She was clearly a grown woman, mid-20s, with the kind of direct, unself-conscious gaze the camera recorded differently than any trained expression, was looking at exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. Her face was partially visible in the frame, turned slightly toward the alley, her expression caught between professional composure and the very beginning of alarm. She had not run, she had walked. He noted this. "What's her full name?" he said. "Mia Russo, 26 years old, born in Jersey City, raised in Hoboken, journalism degree from NYU. She's been doing the streaming thing for 3 years. No criminal record, no significant debts, no affiliations of any kind." Marco paused. "She's clean, boss. She was just walking to a bookshop. It's in her location history." Of course she was. Dominic pulled out a chair and sat. He did not sit in the way that communicated effort. He sat the way large things settled, with the sense that the chair had been arranged for him. Who else saw the exchange? Fontana's team is aware of the stream. Marco stopped, corrected himself. They're proposing a clean-up. The word clean-up, in the language of men like Fontana, meant something that had nothing to do with housekeeping. Dominic let the silence sit for 3 full seconds, which was his version of a very loud sound. "No," he said. "Sir, Fontana's proposal is noted and declined. This woman is not a target." He kept his eyes on the screen where Mia Russo was now back on a main street, the crisis already absorbed into the ongoing performance of her broadcast, talking to her camera with the fluid ease of someone who treated the entire world as her extended living room. She's an asset, she just doesn't know it yet. Another silence. Across the table, his consigliere, a silver-haired man named Luca Benedetti, who had been doing this job since Dominic's father ran the operation, leaned forward. "An asset," Luca repeated, in the tone he used when he was diplomatically expressing that he thought Dominic had lost his mind. "She has 4.2 million followers and a reputation for authenticity that no PR firm in the world could manufacture. If she becomes a problem, she becomes the kind of problem that requires the kind of attention we cannot afford." Dominic turned from the screen. "If she becomes something else, something we protect, something we manage, then her platform becomes a shield, not a weapon. No one looks for what they're not looking for." "And the footage?" "I'll handle the footage." He turned to Marco. "I need her digital footprint, full profile, every platform, engagement metrics, brand partnerships, and I need the archive of her content. All of it." Marco blinked. "All of it?" "Boss, she's been streaming for 3 years. There are all of it." Dominic repeated, and that was the end of that conversation. He looked back at the screen. Mia Russo was laughing at something a commenter had written, her head tilting back slightly, and the camera caught the column of her throat and the genuine, unguarded quality of the laugh before she recovered herself and pointed the camera at a display of cookbooks in a shop window. 31,000 people were in love with her, in the specific, parasocial, uncomplicated way of people who watched someone's life unfold in real time. He understood the appeal, intellectually. He told himself this was purely strategic. He began watching the archive from the beginning. The thing about Ghost King_official was that he never said much. This was, objectively, part of the mystique. Mia's comment section was not a quiet place. It was a churning river of opinions, inside jokes, running gags, arguments between regulars, and the occasional, deeply unhinged observation that got pinned because it was too chaotic to ignore. Into this river, Ghost King dropped his occasional comments like stones, and they sank immediately and created ripples that lasted for days. His pattern, over the 6 weeks since his first appearance: 1 to 3 comments per stream, always brief, occasionally cryptic, consistently tipping at amounts that made the donation notification sound like a small celebration. The audience had built elaborate theories. The most popular one, constructed in a 17-page thread on her subreddit, was that Ghost King was a retired government intelligence officer who had developed a parasocial attachment to Mia's content as a grounding mechanism for readjusting to civilian life. The second most popular theory was that he was an AI. There was a contingent who believed he was a collective, multiple people sharing one account, which Mia found both paranoid and somehow endearing. She had, over time, started talking to him. Not in any significant way. She talked to everyone in her chat, but there was a particular register she'd developed for Ghost King responses, slightly drier than her usual tone, a little more direct, as though she'd unconsciously calibrated to whatever frequency she imagined he operated on. When he sent $1,000 during a particularly disastrous attempt to make pasta from scratch, the pasta is not al dente, it is whatever the Italian word for defeated is, and wrote only, "You should have used a timer," she'd looked directly into the camera and said, "Ghost King, I want you to know that I did use a timer. The timer betrayed me. This is a systemic failure, and I will not be held personally responsible." The chat had exploded. Ghost King had not responded. 2 days after the alley incident, Mia was doing what she called a recovery stream, low-key, couch-based, half-watching a cooking show and narrating her reactions. She'd addressed the alley footage the day before in a separate, more structured video. "Hi, yes, I accidentally filmed some weirdly tense business meeting. It was awkward. I left immediately. Please don't make it into a thing." Delivered in the breezy tone that her audience trusted, that made drama deflate rather than inflate. She'd been slightly terrified filming that video. She'd had 3 different nightmares about men in suits, but she had a talent, honed over 3 years, for performing ease she did not feel. The VOD was still up. She'd thought about taking it down, and then decided that taking it down would make it a thing, and not taking it down was fine, because it was genuinely just a weird moment, and nothing more. What she did not know was that the clip had been quietly scrubbed from 47 external platforms by a team of digital operators working in shifts. What she did not know was that the metadata had been altered, that the faces in the background had been subtly degraded in every cached version, that an extremely sophisticated network of bots had buried the original clip under an avalanche of other content across every platform it had appeared on. What she did not know was that this operation had been executed with the quiet precision of a military campaign by Marco Coretti's team, working under instructions from a man who had watched 17 hours of her content in approximately 2 days. What she did know was that Ghost King _official joined her recovery stream at the 40-minute mark and donated $2,000 with the note, "You handled yesterday well. Most people wouldn't have." She stared at the notification for a moment that was almost too long for the stream, a half-second where the performance slipped and she was genuinely surprised. "Ghost King," she said carefully, looking at the camera with the particular expression she made when she was thinking fast. "That is either the nicest thing you've ever said to me or the most ominous, and I genuinely cannot tell which." She paused. "Thank you. And also, I just want to note for the audience, I handled it by walking away very quickly and then going home and stress-eating half a wheel of brie, so well is relative." She glanced at the chat, where the audience was rioting about Ghost King's comment in the way they always did when he appeared. Someone had written, "He knows," which received 847 likes and counting. She laughed it off. She was very good at laughing things off. In a conference room on the 43rd floor of a building she had walked past approximately 300 times without ever looking up at, Dominic Voss was watching her laugh and thinking about the fact that she had walked out of that alley without running, without screaming, without broadcasting to 31,000 people exactly what she'd seen. She'd tilted the camera. She'd backed up. She'd reframed, and then she'd redirected her audience's attention as smoothly as a magician palming a card. She knew what she was doing, he said to no one in particular. Luca was the only other person in the room, and Luca, who had learned to read Dominic's silences the way some people read weather, said nothing. "She has a journalism degree," Dominic continued. "She knows what footage means. She knows what she could do with it." He turned from the screen. She chose not to. Is that significant? Dominic thought about the 17 hours of content, the way she spoke to strangers, the way she handled the occasional moments when her broadcast went somewhere uncomfortable, not by performing discomfort, but by absorbing it, turning it into something manageable, protecting the audience from whatever was actually happening behind her eyes. "It's interesting," he said, which was a word he used carefully. He picked up his phone, pulled up the Ghost King account that his digital team had constructed for him 6 weeks ago, a contingency measure originally, a way to monitor her platform from inside it, to gauge what she was sharing and when. It had become something else gradually. He was aware of this. He was a man who excelled at being aware of things he was doing, even as he continued doing them. He typed, "You're braver than you know." He sent $5,000. He watched her read it on screen, watched the slight change in her expression, not the performed delight she gave most large donations, but something quieter, more considered. She looked at the camera for a moment without saying anything. "I'm not sure that's true," she said finally, "but thank you, Ghost King." A beat. Weirdo. The chat. LMAOOOO. She called him a weirdo. The audience is in shambles. Dominic Voss smiled. It was a small thing, barely a shift at the corners of his mouth. But Luca Benedetti, who had known this man since he was 12 years old, noted it with the careful attention of a man filing evidence. He had never once, in 24 years, seen Dominic Voss smile at a screen. Mia had a rule about Ghost King. She did not Google him. This rule had been established approximately 3 weeks into his patronage, when she'd caught herself opening a search tab with his username typed in, and had then closed it with the particular self-awareness of someone who has been a content creator long enough to know that parasocial relationships run in both directions. She knew things about her regulars: coffee cart Carlos's daughter's name, the city concerned citizen Karen had grown up in, the fact that one of her most consistent viewers was a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher in Vermont who had discovered her content by accident and now watched every stream. This knowledge was tender, and she was careful with it. Ghost King was different. Ghost King had no presence to investigate. She knew this much from the absence of search results. She hadn't been able to help a preliminary check. The account was new, the profile was empty, and the money was real because it deposited directly. Whatever he was in his actual life, he had no digital shadow she could find, which was so unusual as to be almost impressive. Everyone had a digital shadow in this era. Even people who tried not to had breadcrumbs. Unless they specifically knew how not to leave them. She thought about this occasionally, usually late at night when the stream was off and the apartment was quiet in the particular way of New York City quiet, which was not actually quiet, but rather a constant ambient hum that she'd learnt to sleep inside. She thought, who has no digital shadow? And the answer that came back was someone who has intentionally erased it. She did not pursue this line of thinking very far because she was not fundamentally a suspicious person. She was a curious one, which was different. Curiosity was expansive and open, while suspicion was narrow and closed. She preferred the expansive version. What she was, as of 3 weeks ago, was increasingly aware that the Ghost King dynamic was becoming material. "We need to talk about the Ghost King's situation," said her best friend and unofficial producer, Jamie Park, dropping onto the couch in Mia's apartment with a laptop and an expression of professional concern. Jamie was 28, Korean-American, and had a marketing degree she used aggressively in service of Mia's career in the role of unpaid advisor that they both pretended was going to eventually become a paid position. She had been doing this for 2 years. The role had gradually expanded to include brand deal negotiations, social media strategy, and sitting on Mia's couch eating her food while watching her do things. "There's no situation," Mia said from the kitchen, where she was doing something optimistic with a sourdough starter. "He's donated over $22,000 in the past 2 months. Mia looked up from the sourdough. That's legal. You can donate money to streams. Lots of people." $22,000, Mia. The next highest donor in the same period is $412. He is so far above your average super chatter that the comparison is... It's not even a comparison. It's a different category. He has a lot of money and he likes my content. Some people have a lot of money. Some people, Jamie said, also might be trying to get close to you for non-benign reasons. Mia considered this. Outside, the city made its city sounds. She thought about the alley, which she hadn't told Jamie about. Not the full version, not the part where she'd looked at the camera and tilted it intentionally toward the scene before backing out. She'd told Jamie the version she'd told her audience. Weird business meeting, uncomfortable, moved on. "Ghost King's been around since before the alley thing," she said. "If he was some kind of, I don't know, stalker, he'd have an account with some history. He'd be in my comments more, wanting attention. He barely says anything." That's not reassuring. That's actually the opposite of reassuring. Jamie, I'm just saying, I hear you. I do. I am going to continue monitoring the situation with mature, adult judgment. Mia looked at her sourdough starter. Is this supposed to smell like this? Jamie leaned over to look. That smells like a crime. Ghost King is not a crime, Mia said, and neither is my sourdough. Both are fine. Both things, it turned out, were considerably more complicated than fine. The same afternoon, across town, Marco Caretti was presenting Dominic with a dossier that had been 3 weeks in the making. The cover sheet read, Russo, MIA, full profile. It was 47 pages long. Dominic read it the way he read everything, completely, without pausing, without taking notes, because he didn't need to take notes. He had a memory that retained things against their will. Content output, 3 to 5 pieces per week for 3 years. Estimated viewership across platforms, approximately 6 million unique monthly viewers. Advertiser relationships, clean, no history of controversy. Journalistic training apparent in her approach to sensitive topics. She consistently balanced disclosure with restraint in a way that suggested not just instinct, but methodology. Personal. Parents in Hoboken. Father a retired firefighter, mother a nurse. No siblings. Close friendship network, small and long established. Romantic history. 2 documented relationships, both amicable endings. Neither man had said anything unpleasant about her, publicly or privately. This last detail was in the dossier because Marco was thorough, and also because Dominic had not asked him not to include it. At the bottom of the last page, a note in Marco's handwriting. She is, as far as we can determine, exactly who she appears to be. This is unusual. Dominic read this note twice. She doesn't need us to be protecting her, Luca said from across the desk. He had been watching Dominic read with the patient attention of someone who has made his peace with not being able to change outcomes, only observe them. She's managing herself. Yes, Dominic closed the dossier, which is why Fontana's people haven't moved on her. She's not playing scared. If she'd run from the alley, posted a frantic video, named what she saw, she'd have drawn the kind of attention that would have made her a liability. Instead, she absorbed it and redirected. He tapped the cover page. She's been doing this for 3 years, with difficult conversations, difficult moments on camera. It's a skill set. You are describing her as a strategic asset again. I am noting observable facts. Dominic. Luca said his name the way one says a name when one is trying to use it as a full sentence. When was the last time you read a 47-page document about someone you were simply monitoring for operational security? Dominic looked up. Never, Luca answered for him. Never. In 15 years, not once. The silence in the office had a particular quality. Outside, Manhattan moved in its usual relentless way, indifferent to the conversation. Set up the next stage of the containment protocol, Dominic said. I want her flagged for protection, not surveillance. Anything that moves against her comes to me first. And the personal channel? A pause. I'll manage that myself. The video went viral on a Tuesday. Mia hadn't meant for it to go viral. She rarely meant for anything specific to go viral, which was, ironically, part of why things went viral. The video in question was a day in my life piece that had started normally enough. Morning routine, matcha, a walk through the West Village, lunch at a counter spot she loved. But somewhere around the 40-minute mark, an elderly man at the counter had struck up a conversation about a crossword clue. 4 letters, kingpin. And Mia had answered immediately, Tsar, and then caught herself midstream, making a face that she described in the caption as me remembering all my life choices simultaneously. The face became a meme. The video got 30 million views. The comment section was electric. And Ghost King _official donated $10,000 with the message, Tsar, correct, well done. She stared at this notification for approximately 4 seconds on stream, which was, by the standards of her tight professional performance, an eternity. Okay, she said slowly. Okay, Ghost King, I'll bite. What does that mean? Chat. He knows about the alley. He's the Tsar. Ghost King is the Mafia. She laughed, genuinely, the kind that doubled her forward. Chat has completely lost it. Chat has abandoned reason. Chat, you need to go outside. She shook her head. Thank you for the donation, Ghost King. Your psychological warfare is unmatched. The reply came 20 seconds later. It wasn't warfare. It was a compliment. See, a normal person, Mia told the camera, would say, great video, and that would be the compliment. You said, Tsar, correct, well done, which I appreciate, but is deeply unhinged behaviour, and I want you to sit with that. The chat had 847 people simultaneously typing variations of, she's flirting with a ghost. She wasn't flirting. She was doing the thing she always did, finding the register of a person and meeting them there. The thing was, Ghost King's register was, she didn't have a precise word for it, dry, assured, the way someone spoke when they didn't need to prove anything and knew it. She found herself curious about the texture of it, the same way she'd find herself curious about a book based on its first paragraph. Journalistic training, she told herself. She was simply categorizing information. What she did not know was that when she'd asked, "What does that mean?" it had been read in a room of 12 operatives who debated the possible interpretations for 6 minutes before Dominic overruled them all and typed the response himself. What she did not know was that her comment section's theory, Ghost King is the Mafia, had been screenshotted, sent to Marco, and filed in a folder labelled Public Speculation Non-Actionable. Because the comment section saying something as a joke was not the same thing as anyone believing it. What she did not know, and would not learn for some time, was that the $10,000 donation had been a reaction, barely controlled, to watching her nail the crossword clue kingpin without hesitation, and then immediately make that face. The face of someone who had done something instinctive and wasn't sure yet how she felt about it. He'd recognized something in it. He understood instinct. He spent most of his life navigating the gap between what one does and what one decides. And that face was someone living in exactly that gap. He'd donated $10,000 and said, Tsar. Correct. Well done. And then spent the next 30 minutes being irritated with himself. She'll make the connection, Marco said, because Marco had a talent for saying uncomfortable things at maximum velocity. She won't, Dominic said. She said herself it was a meme. She's already reframed it. She's also been talking to you twice a week for 6 weeks. She's been talking to a username for 6 weeks. It's not the same thing. In my experience, Luca said from the corner, in the voice he used for things he'd observed long enough to be certain of, the people who draw the hardest lines between two things are usually the ones who feel them starting to blur. Dominic looked at him. Luca looked back, serene and impossible to intimidate, which was one of 3 reasons Dominic kept him around. Expand the protection detail, Dominic said. Discreet. She cannot know. What are we protecting her from at this point? Fontana's men have confirmed they consider the footage compromised. Our cleanup was clean. The threat level is, I didn't ask for a threat assessment. He picked up his phone. I asked for a protection detail. Marco, who had worked for Dominic for 9 years and possessed an extremely refined sense of when not to say things, made a note and said nothing. That same evening, Mia sat on her fire escape, not streaming, just thinking, which was something she'd had to deliberately relearn how to do without an audience, with a glass of wine and her phone face down in her lap. The city below was doing its Tuesday night thing, taxis, voices, the specific percussion of a city that never fully quieted. She was thinking about Ghost King. Not in the Jamie warned me way, in the purely curious, journalistic, this is an interesting puzzle way. Because here was the thing about people who donated large amounts of money to content creators, they usually wanted something. Recognition, acknowledgement, a sense of connection, sometimes influence. Ghost King wanted nothing. He said barely anything. He donated and then went silent. He appeared when she'd done something she was quietly proud of and said something that suggested he'd noticed exactly what she was proud of, and then he disappeared again. It was like being observed by something that actually paid attention. She picked up her phone, not to go live, just to open a new note. She wrote, Things I know about Ghost King. 1. Has significant financial resources. 2. Has no traceable digital presence. 3. Pays attention. 4. Says exactly as much as he means to and not a word more. 5. Has on 3 separate occasions made a comment that was specifically about something I thought no one had noticed. She stared at that last point for a while. Then she wrote, Either he's been watching very carefully for a long time, or he already knew me before he started watching. She put the phone down, picked up the wine, watched the city. Or, she wrote after a moment, he's just very perceptive. She crossed out everything else and wrote very perceptive in capital letters and underlined it, the way you underline something you're trying to convince yourself of. It didn't quite work. November arrived in Manhattan the way it always did, without announcement, the trees going copper and then bare almost overnight, the tourists thinning, the city settling into the particular efficiency of a place that had stopped performing for visitors and returned to itself. Mia did a live walk through the village in the rain, which her audience found extremely content-worthy, despite the fact that she was visibly cold and her umbrella was losing a structural battle with the wind. Ghost King sent $3,000 and wrote, "Get a better umbrella." "This is a perfectly good umbrella," she told the camera, holding up the inside-out wreckage. "This umbrella gave its life for content. A little respect." "Next stream, I'll send you one," she laughed. "You can't send an umbrella through a live stream chat, Ghost King." "I'm aware of how live streams work." "Are you? Because you said you'd send me one." "I said I'd send you one, not through the chat." The entire comment section had a collective aneurysm.
The "he knows where she lives" theories began immediately and were entirely correct, which no one, including Mia, who treated it as a joke, found alarming because it arrived in the packaging of a charming internet exchange rather than what it was. The umbrella arrived 2 days later. It was a Burberry trench coat-style umbrella in a shade of deep navy that matched the jacket she'd been wearing during the rainy stream, because the person who had selected it had watched that stream and noticed the jacket. There was no note. The shipping label had a P.O. box in Midtown as the return address. Mia stared at the box for a long time. Then she unboxed it on stream, and when she saw what it was, she did the thing she almost never did, which was fall completely silent. "Ghost King," she said finally, very carefully, "this is a $200 umbrella." Chat, she's getting gifts now. Mia is being courted by a ghost. I'm crying. "I'm fine," she told the chat. I'm registering this." She looked at the umbrella. She looked at the camera. "Thank you. This is very thoughtful. Genuinely." She paused. "Also slightly alarming that you know my address. But you've donated over $30,000 at this point, so presumably you're not the kind of person who... Actually, you know what? I don't know what kind of person you are. That's the thing." Ghost King did not respond for 4 minutes, which was long enough for the chat to develop 3 entirely new theories. Then, "Ask me something." Mia felt the shift, the way a conversation moved from ambient noise to actual conversation. She could see 33,000 people watching this happen in real time. "Okay," she said. She thought about it. "If you could only keep one, all your money or all your knowledge?" Knowledge. Money is a tool. Tools can be replaced. Interesting. She leaned forward slightly. What kind of knowledge? The kind that tells you who people are before they tell you themselves. She absorbed this. That's either the most useful or the most dangerous thing to be able to do. Yes. The chat was completely losing it. Mia sat with the umbrella in her lap and thought about that answer. The blankness of yes as a complete response to an either/or question. "Are you dangerous, Ghost King?" she asked. The question came out lighter than she'd intended it, because she was performing ease for the audience, but she was also, and this was the thing she acknowledged only to herself, asking it sincerely. The pause was longer this time, long enough that the chat started filling with guesses, long enough that Mia's heart did something that she told herself was excitement about the bit and not anything else. Only to the right people. And I'm not one of the right people. No, you're the opposite. She opened her mouth to ask what that meant, and then, this was the journalistic training, the 6 years of knowing when a source was giving you everything they were going to give you. She closed it. She let it sit. "Okay," she said instead. She held up the umbrella. "I'm keeping this. It's beautiful. Thank you." Chat. She said it's beautiful. Ghost King won. She ended the stream an hour later and then sat in her apartment in the silence and thought about "You're the opposite" for longer than was probably healthy. In the war room, 12 operatives had watched this entire exchange with the focused attention of people reading intelligence intercepts. When it ended, no one spoke for a moment. Marco broke first. "That was personal," he said, in a tone that communicated both observation and concern. "It was strategic, Dominic said, in a tone that communicated that this was the only interpretation he was accepting. Boss. Marco chose his words with the careful placement of someone walking across ice. You told her she's the opposite of dangerous. You sent her a $200 umbrella in her favourite colour. Her jacket was navy. It was a reasonable inference. You watched the stream to note the jacket colour so you could match the umbrella. A beat. The jacket was in the file, Dominic said. Marco, was she wearing it in the file? Marco looked at his notes. No, he said quietly. You watched the stream. The room had the particular silence of 12 people collectively and professionally pretending they hadn't heard something. Dominic looked at the now dark centre screen. His expression was the one he wore during high-stakes negotiations, contained, deliberate, giving nothing. The situation remains operational, he said. We proceed accordingly. He left the room. No one said anything for approximately 30 seconds after the door closed. Then one of the junior operatives, youngest in the room, had been there 6 months, said very quietly, "He bought her an umbrella." "That will be the last time you say that in this building," Luca said pleasantly. And that was the end of the debrief. The call from her agent came on a Thursday morning. Voss Tech wants to discuss a potential partnership, said Dana, her agent, in the voice she used when she was trying not to sound too excited about something. Dana had 2 voices, professional and professional but excited. Mia had learned to tell them apart by the speed of the syllables. Voss Tech, Mia repeated. She was mid-breakfast and she set down her fork. The Voss Tech, like Dominic Voss's Voss Tech. That's the one. They've been in conversation with a few creators about their new AI division launch. It's a 6-figure deal for a 3-month campaign. 6 figures was a number that still made Mia's nervous system do something complicated, despite 3 years of being in the industry. She'd grown up watching her parents manage careful budgets, her father's firefighter salary and her mother's nursing income stretched thoughtfully across a family in Hoboken, and no amount of financial success had entirely overwritten that particular operating system. "What's the catch?" she asked, because there was always a catch, and Dana knew it too. "No catch. They want authentic lifestyle integration. You using their new AI assistant product naturally, on stream, no scripts. Very your lane." They specifically cited your approach to brand integrations. Specifically? The rep I spoke to used the phrase editorial integrity. Dana paused. "I think someone at Voss Tech has been watching your content." Mia thought of something. She thought of a black profile photo and the absence of a digital shadow and the particular quality of someone who paid very precise attention. She thought, no, that's a paranoid connection. Voss Tech was a multi-billion-dollar company. They had brand partnership departments. They didn't send individual notes through anonymous streaming donations. "Tell them I'll take a meeting," she said. The meeting was in a week. The location? Voss Tower, 42nd floor, the corporate suites. She had walked past that building 300 times. Dominic learned about the meeting request 30 seconds after it was sent. This was not surveillance. This was, technically, operationally, strategic information management. He had people in every room that mattered, and a brand partnership department that had been briefed to approach Mia Russo approximately 6 weeks earlier on his instruction as part of the containment protocol's secondary phase. The containment protocol. That was what he was calling it. Luca had stopped calling it that. Luca had started using the phrase, the situation, spoken with a particular inflection that managed to be both tactful and deeply pointed. She agreed to the meeting, Marco said. Good. Dominic was at his desk, the real desk, his actual office on the 45th floor with the full Manhattan view, the one he let people see because it confirmed exactly what they expected to see, a tech CEO in his environment. Everything in the room had been chosen to communicate a very specific and very incomplete picture of who he was. I'll take the meeting. You? Personally? Marco blinked. Sir, we have a brand partnerships director. I'll take it. The silence that followed had the quality of everyone in the room understanding simultaneously that the containment protocol was no longer the primary operational objective. No one said this. It was filed wordlessly and collectively under things they would not be repeating to anyone. What do I tell Luca? Marco asked. Nothing. I'll tell him myself. He stood at the window. The city below was its usual permanent motion, indifferent and enormous, a thing he'd always loved about it. You could be anything in a city that large. The size absorbed everything. He thought about what Mia Russo had said the previous week, during a stream he'd watched from this office after midnight when the building was mostly empty. Sometimes I think the internet makes everyone visible and no one seen. Like, everyone is being watched, but no one is actually paying attention. He had thought, I am paying attention. He had then immediately recognized this as something he needed to be careful with. He was not, in the general course of his life, a man who was careless. He had built an empire on the particular discipline of wanting things and not showing it, of moving pieces without revealing the hand. The problem he was circling, not quite ready to look at directly, was that what he wanted now did not fit the usual operational framework. You could not protect something and contain it simultaneously. The two objectives, at a certain proximity, became contradictory. He had a meeting in 7 days with a woman who thought he was a tech CEO, who thought Ghost King _official was some eccentric rich fan, who had no idea that for the past 2 months a rotating team of 12 people had been managing the digital landscape around her with the care of gardeners tending something rare. He had 7 days to decide what, exactly, he intended to do with that. She wore the navy jacket. This was not a deliberate choice. It was the jacket she reached for when she wanted to feel professional but not stiff. The one whose colour she'd always privately thought was somewhere between sky and midnight, more complex than it appeared from a distance. She grabbed it from the closet on autopilot and was 3 blocks from her apartment before she registered what she was wearing and stopped on the sidewalk for one brief moment of, why does this feel significant? Before deciding it didn't and continuing. She had done a preparatory stream the night before, brand meeting tomorrow, not naming the company yet, jinx and all that, but it's a big one, wish me luck. The chat had wished her approximately 400 versions of luck, including several in languages she didn't speak, and one that appeared to be a medieval blessing. Ghost King had sent $1,000 and written, "You don't need it." She'd smiled at her phone for 3 seconds and then told herself to stop that. Voss Tower was exactly what she'd expected from the outside, and something she hadn't quite imagined from the inside. The lobby was the kind of thing architectural magazines photographed in natural light, pale marble, negative space used like punctuation, the Voss Tech logo rendered in brushed steel with the subtlety of something that didn't need to announce itself. She checked in at the desk, was escorted to an elevator, and emerged on 42 to be met by a woman named Elena, who had the particular composure of someone very good at managing access. "Mr. Voss will see you in the main conference room," Elena said. "Can I get you anything?" "Coffee, water? I'm fine, thank you." Mia adjusted the strap of her bag. "Mr. Voss is taking the meeting personally." "He is." Eleanor's expression communicated that this was notable without technically confirming that it was notable, which was a masterful little piece of professional communication that Mia filed away for later. "This way, please." The conference room was not the war room. This was the version of the building people were meant to see. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a long table of pale wood, the Manhattan skyline arranged behind it like a backdrop. Mia walked in and clocked. No one else in the room yet. A chair at the head of the table, a tablet with a presentation queued, a glass of water that matched the specification she'd mentioned on stream about preferring still to sparkling. This last detail she attributed to research and not the specific reason it was there. The door opened. She had not done her research on Dominic Voss, which was uncharacteristic. She normally prepared obsessively for any professional meeting. She had prepared for this one by reviewing Vostech's product line and public commitments, and then, at some point around 11 p.m., closing all the tabs because she was tired and she trusted Dana's vetting. She had not looked up Dominic Voss specifically. She looked up at him now and understood, immediately and physically, why certain men occupied space differently than others. He was tall, not unusually so, but combined with the particular way he moved, which was without any wasted motion, it registered as more. His suit was dark and precisely fitted. His face was... She ran through a short internal catalogue and landed on the kind of face that a camera finds interesting, without quite capturing why. Dark eyes, very still. The jaw of someone who made decisions without apology. He was looking at her with the expression of someone who knew exactly who she was. This was not unusual. He'd commissioned the brand meeting. He'd presumably watched her content. Brands always research their potential partners. The slight difference she couldn't entirely name was that he looked at her the way someone looked when they recognized, not when they'd researched. "Ms. Russo," he said. His voice was... She'd heard that voice before. She filed this immediately under impossible and continued. "Mr. Voss." She extended her hand. His handshake was brief and certain, the kind that communicated it was the same handshake he gave everyone and that everyone got exactly the same version. "Thank you for meeting with me personally. I understand you don't usually... I take meetings when the situation warrants it." He gestured to a chair. She sat. He sat. Neither across from her nor beside her, but at the corner of the table. The placement of someone who had made a deliberate choice about geometry. "Your platform is one of the more interesting ones we've considered working with." "Interesting." She tilted her head. "What makes it interesting?" "Most influencer content at your scale is predictable. There's a template. You're aware of the template, and you're deliberately working against it, which takes more discipline than working with it." He said this with the directness of someone who didn't value preamble. "Your audience trusts you because you've earned it rather than manufactured it. That's what we need for this campaign." Mia was quiet for a moment. "You've watched the content," she said. Our team has done extensive research, yes. Right, of course. She pulled out her notebook. She still took notes by hand in meetings, a habit she'd never shed from journalism school, and uncapped a pen. Tell me about the product. He talked about the product. She listened and took notes and asked questions that were specific and occasionally unexpected, the kind that made him stop and recalibrate slightly, which she noted with the peripheral awareness she'd spent 3 years developing for when a conversation was doing something real versus performing. He was not performing. Neither was she. The meeting was supposed to be 45 minutes. It ran 90. When she finally stood to leave, she was aware of 2 things simultaneously. That this was a good deal professionally, and that something about this room had the texture of something she'd experienced before and couldn't place. She was at the door when she stopped, turned. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He looked at her, steady, unhurried. "Yes." "This room," she said. She gestured at the windows. "Do you actually use this one? It feels like a room people come to, not a room you're in." The pause was very small. Most people would have missed it. "I have a different office," he said. "You're perceptive." She smiled. The real one, not the performance. 3 years of watching people on camera. You get good at the tell. She shouldered her bag. "It was a pleasure, Mr. Voss." "Dominic," he said. She paused at the door. "Mia." She walked out. In the elevator she stood very still and thought, "You don't need it." The voice. That voice. She dismissed it before the elevator reached the lobby. The Voss tech deal went live 2 weeks later. Mia announced it on a Tuesday morning stream with the straightforward energy she brought to brand deals she actually liked. "Okay, so here's what it is and here's what it isn't. Here's the product, here's my honest first impression, here's what I'd change." Her audience had been trained over 3 years to trust that when she took a deal, she'd vetted it, and that when she talked about a product on stream, she was giving the same opinion she'd give her best friend. They had also, over 3 years, been trained to understand that the things she passed on were as informative as the things she said yes to. The response was good. The product was genuinely functional. The first integration video got 12 million views in 48 hours. Voss Tech's marketing team sent an enthusiastic response. GhostKing_official sent $15,000 and wrote, "Good partnership, smart choice." She was in the middle of a stream when the notification came in, and she saw the amount and the message and felt something click. Not a specific thought, more like the precursor to one, like a connection forming in the dark. And then the sensation passed, and she responded with her usual calibrated mix of gratitude and mild mockery. "Ghost King, you are consistent in your unhinged generosity, and I appreciate it. Also, what do you mean smart choice? Do you have opinions about my brand deals?" "I have opinions about everything." "That's not alarming at all. What's your opinion about the product?" "I already know what it does." She opened her mouth, closed it. "Do you use Voss Tech products?" A pause. "In a manner of speaking." The chat had opinions about this. Mia did too, but she tabled them because she had a stream to run and a matcha that was going cold. Later, much later, after the stream, she wrote in her notes, "GK said, 'Smart choice' about Voss deal. Said he knows what the product does, in a manner of speaking." What does that mean? She underlined, "manner of speaking." Then she underlined it again. In the war room, Marco was making the face he made when he needed to say something Dominic wouldn't like. The Voss deal puts her in our orbit in a way that is going to be very difficult to manage if she starts connecting. She won't connect it, Dominic said. He was at his actual desk, in his actual office, reviewing a separate matter, a dispute with a rival family that required the kind of quiet resolution that never appeared in any official record, anywhere. Two things in two registers, which was how he'd always operated. She's a journalist by training. She's an influencer by practice. Those are different skill sets. Dominic, Luca from the corner, in the voice, the girl writes notes about you. She writes notes about a username. She is tracking inconsistencies in a username's behavior and drawing inferences from them. That is exactly what a journalist does. It's also, Luca added, exactly what you did when you read her 47-page file. Twice. The silence had weight. What are you recommending? Dominic said, which was his way of acknowledging a point without technically conceding it. I'm recommending that whatever this is, it resolves before she figures it out independently. Because if she figures it out independently, it will be much worse than if you control the reveal. I was going to say tell her the truth, but yes, control the reveal. That. Dominic looked out at Manhattan. The city was doing what it always did, enormous and indifferent and beautiful. She'll run, he said. This was the thing under the other things. When she knows, she'll run. Maybe, Luca said. She's also the kind of person who walked out of that alley at a controlled pace. The room was very quiet. Give me time, Dominic said. You have very little of it, Luca said, and that was, as usual, the end of that. He messaged her that night, not as Ghost King, she wasn't streaming, through the Voss Tech Partnership Liaison email, which was technically corporate correspondence and therefore completely appropriate and not at all evidence of the line he was aware of walking. The initial metrics from the launch are strong. Your instincts about the integration approach were correct. DV. She responded in 12 minutes, which he noted. Thanks. I'm particular about integrations. I only take deals I'd tell a friend about. He thought about this. Then he typed, What would you tell a friend about us? A pause. Longer than 12 minutes. He did not find this surprising. That you're more interesting than you look on paper, which is saying something because you look pretty interesting on paper, mister. He read this 3 times, then, most things are. She wrote back immediately this time. Are you? More interesting than you look on paper? He thought about his actual answer to this question for a while. Then, that depends on who's reading the paper. I'd like to read it sometime. He stared at his phone in his dark office, the city below luminous and sprawling, the rest of the building long empty. He was aware that what she'd said was corporate flirtation, the comfortable kind that existed in the ambient space of professional relationships that were going well. He was aware that his response to it was not ambient. When you're ready, he wrote. He sent it before he'd finished deciding to. She replied, For what it's worth, I think you're the most unusual CEO I've ever had a meeting with. That's a compliment. He looked at his phone for a very long time. Then he put it face down on his desk and looked out at Manhattan and thought about the controlled pace of a woman walking out of an alley. The months had a quality now, a texture. Mia had been doing the Voss Tech campaign for 6 weeks, and the integration had become genuinely seamless. She'd found real uses for the product, which made talking about it easy in the way that only actual enthusiasm made things easy. She'd also had 2 more meetings with Dominic Voss, both of which were officially about campaign milestones, and both of which had run significantly over time and covered topics that had nothing to do with campaign milestones. They talked about— she was trying to catalogue this in a way that made professional sense and kept running into the difficulty that it didn't make professional sense— everything. He had opinions about urban design and asked her opinions about media. She'd mentioned a book she was reading, and he'd read it by the next meeting, not as a gesture, but clearly because he actually read that way, in large quantities and quickly. She'd made a joke in the first meeting, and he hadn't laughed, which had made her double down, and by the third meeting she'd extracted from him the smallest, most reluctant, almost laugh she'd ever worked for in her life, and she felt like she'd scaled something significant. "You're different when you're not performing," she told him in their third meeting. He looked at her with that still attention. "You think I perform?" "I think everyone performs. I think you perform, CEO of important company, the way I perform, relatable girl next door. We both know what's underneath is more complicated." A pause. "What's underneath you?" The question had a weight that she decided to treat as casual. "I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to investigate things. I got bored of pitching stories and started filming them instead, and it turned into—" she gestured at the general concept of her career. "This." "You still investigate things," he said. "You just don't call it that." She looked at him. "I do, don't I?" It wasn't quite a question. "What about you? What's underneath CEO of important company?" He looked at her for a long time. Then— "Someone who wanted to understand how systems work." "And now you do?" "And now I run them." Something moved across his face, too fast to catch. "It's not the same thing." She wanted to ask him what that meant. She didn't, because she was starting to understand the way he parsed information, what he offered and what he held back, and she recognized the line. She'd spent 3 years recognizing lines. "Ghost King sent me another donation last night," she said instead, a deliberate shift, a lighter gear. Something almost imperceptible happened in his expression. "Your streaming patron. He's been watching since— actually, he first showed up right around when I was considering the Voss partnership." She tilted her head. "Funny coincidence." Dominic looked at her steadily. "The internet is full of coincidences." "He said something interesting last night. I asked him where he'd been. He went quiet for like 2 weeks, which is unusual. And he said, managing other priorities." She paused. "Business language from my anonymous fan." "Maybe he has a job." "Maybe." She picked up her water glass. "Or maybe I've been talking to the same person in 2 different formats, and I'm only just starting to notice because he slipped up." The pause that followed was the kind that had mass. Dominic Voss said nothing. His expression did not change. He was, as she had noted, exceptionally good at not showing things. But the pause itself, the fraction of a second where his response didn't come at its usual pace, was a tell. She felt it. She didn't let on that she felt it. "Interesting theory," he said. "I'm a journalist," she said, "by training." "By training," he agreed. She smiled at him and picked up her notebook, and they continued the meeting, and she didn't say anything else about it. because she had 3 years of practice at identifying things she wasn't ready to look at directly and leaving them alone until she was. But she wrote in her notes on the subway home, DV's pause, 0.8 seconds, consistent eye contact maintained, no micro-expression, but the pause. The pause. She underlined pause 5 times. Then she sat back and looked at the subway ceiling and thought about the specific tone of someone who said, "You don't need it," and someone who said, "You don't need it," and how they sounded, and how impossible it was that they could be the same, and how sometimes the impossible thing was just the true thing wearing a disguise. She put her headphones in. She did not listen to anything. She sat with the knowledge she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. In the war room, Marco had a new dossier. This one was titled Potential Discovery Assessment. He did not show it to Dominic. He showed it to Luca. Luca read it, set it down, and said, "How long does he have?" Marco said, "Weeks, maybe. She's smart, she's patient, she's connecting dots." Luca was quiet for a moment. He needs to tell her himself. And if he won't? Then she'll tell him, Luca said, with the certainty of someone who had read every file and watched every stream and understood, finally and with some fondness, that they were watching something neither of them could manage. And that will be considerably more interesting. The break-in happened on a Wednesday. Mia came home from a dinner with Jamie to find her apartment door unlocked and the particular stillness inside that was different from the stillness of an empty apartment. She knew the difference. She'd lived alone for 4 years, and the space had a quality when she'd left it, a held breath quality. And this was not that. She did not go inside. She stood in the hallway with her phone in her hand and the specific chill of someone whose nervous system is communicating a message it learned 6 weeks ago in an alley. She called the police from the hallway and waited. The officers found the apartment tossed, not violent, but methodical. Drawers opened, files disturbed, the laptop on her desk moved slightly from where she'd left it. Nothing taken. The external hard drive where she kept her stream backups was still there. Her jewellery, small but accumulated, untouched. "Someone was looking for something," the officer said. "I'm aware," Mia said, in the voice she used when she was holding a lot of things very still. She called Jamie. Jamie came over and did the thing she always did in crises, which was make practical observations. "We need to get the lock changed." And then the other thing she did, which was look at Mia with the particular attention of someone who had known her for 7 years and say, "You know what this is about." Mia was quiet. "The alley," Jamie said, still quiet. "Mia." "I don't know for certain," Mia said carefully, "and I don't want to say things I don't know for certain." "Someone broke into your apartment." "Yes. And the only thing they were looking for, given that they left everything else, was files, digital or physical, documentation." Mia looked at the window. "The footage," Jamie said. "The footage is nowhere." Mia turned. "I didn't archive the stream clip. I didn't download it. The platform's auto-archive is there, but it was cleaned up, Jamie. The clip that went around, the versions on other platforms, all of it got buried. I checked. A few weeks after it happened, I went looking for it specifically, and it was... someone had managed it." professionally. Someone managed your footage. Someone with resources. Jamie stared at her. Resources like, I don't know, Mia said. Not a lie. She didn't know. She had a theory that she'd been circling for 2 weeks, like a moon around a planet she wasn't ready to name. I don't know. She slept at Jamie's that night. She didn't stream for 4 days, which her audience noticed and worried over in the way audiences did, sending supportive messages and speculating gently. She posted a brief video. Taking a few days. Everything's fine. Back soon. Ghost King sent $5,000. No message. She stared at the notification. Then she did something she hadn't done in the 4 years she'd been doing this. She sent a direct message to a viewer. Through the donation platform, the only way Ghost King had ever been contactable. She wrote, I need to know if I'm safe. She sent it at 2 a.m. on a Thursday and then put her phone face down on Jamie's guest bed and lay in the dark and waited. His response came in 4 minutes. Yes. She wrote, Promise? A pause, longer than usual. Then, on my life. She looked at those 3 words for a long time. Then she typed, Who are you? This pause was the longest yet. She watched the typing indicator appear and disappear 3 times, which she had never seen him do. Ghost King always responded as though he knew what he was going to say before he said it. This was different. Finally, someone who has been making sure you're safe since October. October. The alley was October. She set the phone down, picked it up, set it down. When she picked it up again, she wrote, I have more questions. I know. When you're ready. She thought about that phrase. When you're ready. He'd said it before, in the corporate email format that she'd been willing herself not to connect, until now. When you're ready. She wrote, Give me a week. Take what you need. She put the phone down and looked at the ceiling of Jamie's guest bedroom and felt the particular sensation of a world rearranging itself around new information. Not collapsing, just rearranging. And thought about the pause in a conference room and a voice she'd heard in 2 frequencies and an umbrella that matched a jacket, and she thought, oh. Just, oh. She gave herself the week. She spent it methodically, not streaming, not publicly processing, but doing the things she'd been trained to do and had never quite stopped doing. Research. She pulled everything she could find on Dominic Voss, which was considerable and curated, and she now recognized with the eye of someone who'd been told to look for absences, very deliberately shaped. The biography added up. The timeline of his companies added up. The public record was consistent and coherent and told a story so clean it had clearly been edited. You learned this in journalism school. The cleanest stories were usually the most constructed. Real lives had seams. She looked for the seams. She found 3. A gap of 8 months between his first company and his MBA program, during which there was no record of him anywhere. A pattern of acquisitions that, when mapped, created an infrastructure network whose specific configuration served no apparent tech purpose, but would serve, extremely well, as a financial routing system for large-scale, anonymous transactions. And the connection. 6 degrees would be generous, but she was trained for indirect networks between 2 of his board members and names that appeared in federal organized crime filings from 2019. She sat with this for 2 days,
Then she thought about a man who'd bought her an umbrella in her exact colour and said, "You are the opposite of dangerous," and sent $5,000 the night someone broke into her apartment without a word, just the money, just the presence. She thought about the meeting where he'd said, "It's not the same thing about running systems versus understanding them," in the tone of someone who'd made a real trade-off. She thought about 31,000 people watching her walk into an alley. She thought about how quickly those videos had been cleaned from the internet, the specific speed and completeness of it. She thought about On My Life. She messaged him through the donation platform, not Ghost King, the Voss Tech corporate liaison email. "I'd like to meet. Not a partnership meeting, a real one. You, me, no brand deck." The response came in 6 minutes. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. An address I'll send separately." She wrote back, "Will I be safe?" His response, "More than anywhere else." She thought about that. Then she wrote, "That's either very reassuring or very alarming, Dominic." The pause. Then, "I see you figured it out. Working theory. I'd like to hear your side. Tomorrow." She put the phone down and looked at the ceiling and thought, "This is either the bravest thing I've ever done or the stupidest," and decided that in her experience, those two things were usually indistinguishable until you were on the other side of them. The address was a restaurant she'd never been to, private dining room on the Upper East Side, the kind of place that had no sign outside and required a phone number to get a table and served 6 courses with a 2-month waiting list. A car arrived for her at 6:45. She'd told Jamie where she was going and had declined Jamie's increasingly intense offers to come along and wait outside, and had also made a point of being on a video call with Jamie from the car, so there was an ongoing documentation of her location. "If I don't call you in 3 hours," she told Jamie, "I call the police and also post the location publicly," Jamie said. "I know. Also, Mia, I know. You don't have to do this." "I want to," she said. And that was true, which was either information about her judgment or information about her. She wasn't sure yet. The restaurant was exactly what she'd expected. Beautiful and private, and lit in the amber and candlelight combination that made everything feel like a painting. The private room was at the back, and it was empty except for him. Dominic Voss stood when she came in. This small courtesy, in the context of everything she'd spent a week reconstructing about who he was, landed differently than it would have in another context. She noted it. She sat across from him and looked at him, and he looked back, and neither of them said anything for a moment. In the particular silence of two people acknowledging that the map of their relationship has just been redrawn. "You cleaned my footage," she said. "Yes." "The break-in?" "Wasn't us. We found out about it after. The people responsible have been handled." She absorbed handled. How handled? "You won't have that problem again." She looked at him. "Ghost King was what? A monitoring operation?" "It started as one." His voice was very steady. She was watching for the tells. "It became something else." "What did it become?" He was quiet for a moment, not the managed quiet of a man waiting for the right word to appear. She'd learned to tell the difference. The genuine quiet of someone stepping to the edge of something. "Something I hadn't planned for," he said. She held his gaze. 3 years of camera work. She knew what unscripted looked like. "Okay," she said. "Tell me all of it." He told her.
Not all of it. She understood this. She was a journalist. She understood that people gave you the version they decided to give you, and your job was to receive it well enough that the version expanded. But he gave her more than she'd expected, and more than she suspected he'd intended when he'd sat down in this room. There was something about the way she listened that made people say more than they meant to. She'd been told this before. The organisation's structure, broadly, the legitimate business, Voss Tech, and the shadow architecture beneath it. The online casinos, the cryptocurrency infrastructure, the network of financial operations that existed in the grey space between legal and illegal at the international level, and in the much less grey space domestically. He was specific enough to be credible, and careful enough not to be incriminating. She noted this because it told her something about how his mind worked. Even in voluntary disclosure, he was managing risk. The alley. The decision. The footage. "You had a team in that meeting," she said. "The men with your emblem on the lapel." "They don't work for me. They work for a family I have ties with. The exchange in the alley was not sanctioned by me, and it created a liability I needed to contain." I was the liability. He met her eyes. "You were a journalist who accidentally captured evidence. You were a woman with 4.2 million viewers and, as I very quickly established, the discipline not to weaponize what you'd seen." He paused. Both of those things mattered. In what order? Another pause, smaller this time, more honest. The second one more than I intended. She looked at the candle on the table, thought about what it meant to be someone's containment protocol, thought about what it meant to be something else. "Ghost King," she said. "That was—" He stopped. "It started as monitoring. You started actually watching?" "Yes." "And donating?" "Yes." "And sending—" The umbrella was— A brief, very controlled pause. "I noticed the jacket. I noted the colour. It was—" He stopped again. She had never, in 3 years of interviewing people and filming people and watching people on camera, seen someone who was this good at managing their external presentation struggle with it. The struggle was almost imperceptible. She only caught it because she was looking for it, because she'd learned to look for it. But it was there. "You noticed the colour of my jacket," she said, keeping her voice level. "Yes." "And you sent me an umbrella to match?" "Yes." "That is," she said carefully, "the most unexpectedly romantic thing anyone has ever done for me, and I am choosing to hold it as a data point rather than a feeling at this moment in time." The look he gave her was— She didn't have a word. It was too fast to catalogue and too complex to reduce. Something in it was close to recognition. "I'm not," he said, "a man who does romantic things." "You sent me a Burberry umbrella in the specific shade of my favourite jacket after watching a stream and noticing what I was wearing," she said. "I don't know what category that falls into, if not romantic." He said nothing. "I'm not saying that to make you uncomfortable," she said, which was not entirely true. She was a little, because something in her needed to test what happened when she pushed against his composure. "I'm saying it because I think you know what it was too. And I think you've been calling it something else. Operational strategy," he said. The smallest edge of something at the corner of his mouth. Not quite the almost laugh she'd extracted in their third meeting, but adjacent to it. "Operational strategy," she repeated. You sent me an umbrella as operational strategy. It kept you in a positive frame toward the organization. Ghost King kept me in a positive frame toward a username who actually noticed when I was brave and when I was scared and said the right thing every single time. She stopped. That was you. He didn't look away. That was me. The silence was different from all the previous silences. It had the quality of something resolved, finally, into its actual shape. I need to think, she said. I'm not leaving, and I'm not walking out, and I'm not going to do anything with what you told me tonight. But I need to think. I know. I'm angry, she said, a little, not about the protection that She stopped. The manipulation, the not telling me. I had 12 people in a room watching me talk to a username thinking I was just... I know. That's a lot. Yes. She looked at him for a long time. He let her look with the patience of someone who understood that what you couldn't change, you had to endure, and that enduring it honestly was the only available option. 3 questions, she said, and I want real answers. Ask them. Were you ever going to tell me? A pause. Honest. I was working toward it. Were you going to let me keep thinking Ghost King was some random donor? The pause was longer, more honest. No. Was any of it, the things you said, as Ghost King, were they strategy, or were they... True, he said, before she finished. They were all true. She nodded, picked up her wine glass, set it back down. I'm going to go home tonight and think. I'll be in touch. She stood. He stood, that small courtesy again. She was almost to the door when she stopped. The very first time, she said, without turning around. The flash mob video. You wrote, "Try to stay out of trouble. You won't." Why that? She heard him behind her, the stillness of him. Then, because you were laughing, in the middle of something you hadn't planned for. You were genuinely laughing. A pause. I hadn't seen someone do that in a long time. She stood at the door for one more moment, then she left. In the car, she called Jamie because she'd promised, and she said, "I'm okay. I'll tell you everything later." She looked out at the city moving past. She was, against all reason, smiling. She came back 5 days later, not to the restaurant, to Voss Tower, not to the corporate floor with its staged glass conference rooms and the performance of CEO. She sent a message through the liaison email. "I need to see your actual office." His response, "Floor 45, 6 p.m. She went. The 45th floor was different, less curated, more inhabited, the desk large and genuinely used, papers weighted down by objects that had been chosen for function rather than aesthetics. Books with broken spines. A city view from 3 walls that didn't perform itself the way the conference room's view had, just presented itself, the way a view only did when someone looked at it constantly enough to take it for granted. He was standing at the north window when she came in. He turned. They had 5 days of distance between them and whatever had been established in the restaurant, and she watched him recalibrate slightly at the sight of her. Not dramatically, a fraction, the kind she'd been trained to catch. "Sit down," she said, and he did, Which was interesting, because in 3 months of knowing him, she'd watched everyone else in any room respond to him as the gravitational centre. He sat as though it was the obvious thing to do. She had thought carefully for 5 days. She had pros and cons and moral frameworked and argued with Jamie, who had taken a position that evolved from absolutely not to I'm monitoring this very closely to okay, but he sent you the umbrella and I am not made of stone. She had also, if she was honest, spent 2 nights watching old streams and listening to Ghost King's comments in a new light, and felt the particular sensation of recognizing a voice you'd been hearing without placing it. She sat across from him, put her notebook on the desk. "Here are my terms," she said. He looked at the notebook. Something crossed his face, not quite the almost laugh, something quieter, more internal. He looked like a man being surprised, and she thought it was probably not a sensation he was familiar with. "You're negotiating," he said. "I'm establishing parameters. There's a difference." She opened the notebook to the page she'd prepared. "I will not report what I know. I was never going to. The footage was already buried. The story has no clean ending, and frankly, it would destroy the career I've spent 3 years building. Journalism was my past. This is my present. I'm not sacrificing it." He nodded once. No visible relief. She noted this. "I'm not a pawn. Whatever operational category I was filed under, assets, containment, whatever, I am removing myself from that category effective now. I am a person you know, not a person you manage." "Agreed. If I am ever in danger, and I understand that may not be zero given what I know, you tell me directly. No invisible protection teams, no surveillance I don't know about. You tell me, I make informed decisions." He held her eyes. "The level of detail I can share safely. I understand there are operational limits. I'm saying my awareness of my own situation is not negotiable." A pause. Then, "Agreed." She looked down at her notebook, looked back up. "And I want to know you, not Ghost King, not the CEO performance. You." She held his gaze. "That's what I came back for. That's the thing I thought about for 5 days and couldn't talk myself out of." The silence was the particular kind that only happened when something true had been said without hedging. "Mia," he said, and then nothing else for a moment. Her name in his mouth had a quality. She'd heard it from him once before, in the meeting, and she'd thought about it intermittently since. He said it the way someone said a thing they were careful with. "This is—" He stopped, started again. "What I am makes this complicated, in ways that are not small. I know. I did extensive research." She held up the notebook briefly. "I know what you are. I'm here anyway. I need you to understand that I'm not here because of what you represent or what you have. I'm here because of a voice I heard in a donation chat that said exactly the right thing every time, and it turns out the voice belongs to you, and I'd like to find out what that means. It could be dangerous. Most interesting things are." She paused. "You told me I was brave, as Ghost King, more than once. I'd like to live up to that." He looked at her for a long time. The city through the windows moved in its usual enormous way. The desk between them was covered in evidence of a life she was only beginning to understand the shape of. "I don't know how to do this," he said. It came out bluntly, without the usual managed surface, blunt in the way of something true rather than something meant to perform vulnerability. I know how to run things. I know how to manage outcomes. I've never... A stop. I haven't had someone who... Who what? Who looked at everything and stayed, he said. She absorbed this, the specificity of it. Well, she said, I'm here, so you'll figure it out. The almost laugh again, barely, but there. I'll figure it out, he said. She went back to streaming. She'd been offline for 6 days, which was, for her audience, a geological era. She returned with a "Things I've Been Thinking About" video that was deliberately low-key and genuinely oblique, because there were things she was thinking about that she had no intention of putting on camera, and that was fine. That was hers. The audience received her back with the warmth of a crowd that had been slightly worried and was now relieved. The comment section flooded. She sat on her couch and talked for 3 hours, about everything and nothing in the specific way she did when she was processing something she wasn't ready to name. Ghost King did not appear in the stream. She noted this. She did not address it. After the stream, she picked up her phone and typed through the liaison channel. No Ghost King tonight? Did you want him there? She thought about it. It's going to be strange, going forward. Strange how? Because when I look at the chat now, I'll be looking for you. And you'll be somewhere else entirely, watching me look. A pause, then, I can stop the account. She thought about this for a while. The idea of Ghost King simply ceasing, the black profile photo disappearing from her chat, the donation notifications going quiet. She thought about what that meant for her audience, who had made Ghost King part of the mythology. Not yet, she wrote. Give me some time to figure out the transition. Whatever you need. She put the phone down and picked it up again almost immediately. Typed, What are you doing right now? A pause longer than his usual processing time, which she'd now calibrated well enough to note. Working. You? I just streamed for 3 hours. I know, I watched. She looked at her phone, thought about him in his 45th floor office watching her live stream. Thought about the weirdness of this and also, against her better judgment, about how the weirdness was currently coexisting with something warmer. What did you think? She typed. You were distracted in the second hour. You kept looking at the donation feed. She laughed, out loud in her empty apartment, which startled her slightly. She wrote, I was looking for you. I know, he wrote back, and then, after a moment, I was there. The nightclub was not her idea. Her ideas tended toward the ambient and the low stakes. Dominic's introduction into her life brought the high stakes as a sort of structural feature, and she was adjusting. The invitation came through the liaison channel. I want you to come somewhere. Friday. It will require getting dressed up, if you're willing. And she'd said yes before she'd finished reading it, which told her something about her own current operating state that she was choosing not to examine too closely. The club was underground, in the literal sense, subterranean, accessed through a door on a side street in the meatpacking district that looked exactly like every other door on that street, but opened onto a staircase that descended into something that felt like a separate city. Black walls and amber light, and music that was low enough to talk over, which she understood meant it was the kind of place where people came to say things, not to escape them. He was already there when she arrived. He was always already there. She'd noticed this about him. The way he inhabited spaces before other people did, settled into them so that when she arrived he was already part of the architecture. He was at a corner table and he was not alone. This was new information. She absorbed it, 2 men and a woman, all in that particular register of controlled elegance that she was learning to recognize as the aesthetic of people who existed in the world he inhabited. They looked at her with the polite assessment of people who had been told she was coming and had opinions about this they were managing. Dominic stood when she reached the table, that small courtesy again, always. Mia. And then to the table, Luca, Marco, Elena. Luca was older than the others, silver-haired and watchful, with the eyes of someone who'd been assessing people for a very long time. He extended his hand. "Miss Russo, we've heard a great deal about you." "From Dominic?" she asked. "From your content," Luca said, perfectly pleasantly. "I've watched approximately 60 hours of it." She blinked. 60 hours? "You are quite something," he said, with the comfortable certainty of someone delivering a verdict. Marco was younger, angular, with the particular quality of someone who processed information very quickly and was occasionally surprised by the results. He shook her hand and said, "The umbrella was in the file," in a way that answered a question she hadn't asked, confirming a theory she hadn't fully stated. "I know," she said, and watched his expression do something interesting. Elena, who she recognized from the 42nd floor, the woman with the extraordinary professional composure, smiled at her with something that was more than professional warmth. "It's nice to meet you in a context that doesn't involve a brand deck," she said. She sat. Dominic sat beside her, not across, a choice she registered. He was close enough that she was aware of him in the way you were aware of a significant presence without needing to look directly at it. "How many of you knew?" she asked the table. A pause. Then Marco said, "All of us," with the careful tone of a man preparing to be judged. "The room full of operatives thing," she said, and watched 3 people exchange glances with the specific quality of people who had been waiting to find out if she knew about that. Yes, Marco said. "You watched my streams in a conference room." "We did." She looked at Dominic. "Were you there?" "Not always," he said, "but sometimes." "Yes." She looked at the table for a moment. Then she picked up her drink. It had appeared from somewhere, the right thing without being asked, which she was getting used to, and said, "I want it on the record that this is completely unhinged. The whole setup, the room, the analysis, She stopped. "You know what? I'm a journalist. I'm going to lean into the story." "That's the right instinct," Luca said, and she had the feeling he'd been waiting to approve of something. His name was Alessandro Marchetti, and he arrived at the club at 11:15 with the energy of someone who owned the room and resented that the math didn't confirm it. Mia caught it immediately. The shift in Dominic's posture, barely there, the way a very controlled stillness became slightly more deliberate. She'd been watching him long enough to know that increased stillness usually meant increased threat assessment. She glanced at the man crossing the room. Marchetti was handsome in an aggressive way, the kind of handsome that wanted you to notice it. He was younger than Dominic, early 30s, with the clothing of someone who'd recently come into serious money and the bearing of someone still learning how to carry it. He moved through the room like someone who'd been told he was important too recently to have internalized the composure that came with actually being it. He stopped at their table. "Thos," he said, in the tone of someone who'd practiced the casualness of that. "Didn't know you came to places like this." "Alessandro," Dominic said. His voice had not changed. His eyes had. Marchetti looked at Mia with the transparent curiosity of someone who expected information to reveal itself under his gaze. She met his gaze evenly, having spent 3 years developing the specific talent of meeting gazes evenly. "And this is?" he asked, directing it at Dominic. "Someone I'm here with," Dominic said, with exactly the flatness of someone removing any ambiguity about whether further inquiry was welcome. Marchetti's smile did something that wasn't quite a smile. "The influencer," he said. He said it the way people said things they meant as diminishments. "I've seen your content. You were in an interesting alley a few months ago." The table went very still.
Not dramatically. The specific trained stillness of people who were managing a threat. Mia felt the chill and set it aside. She'd been a journalist. She knew what intimidation looked like when it showed up in the clothing of small talk. "I walk in a lot of alleys," she said pleasantly. "It's New York. They're everywhere." Marchetti looked at her for a beat too long. Then his gaze moved back to Dominic with the specific displacement of someone who'd tested something and gotten a result he needed to recalibrate around. "We should talk," he said, "about ongoing arrangements." "My office," Dominic said. "Schedule it." A pause in which something passed between the two men that Mia felt rather than saw. The specific frequency of a power dynamic being contested and resolved in the span of 3 seconds. Marchetti nodded once, in the way of someone accepting a position they hadn't chosen, and moved away. Mia waited until he was out of earshot. Then, "The man from the alley." "His family," Dominic said. "He knows I was there." "He suspected. He knows now from your reaction, or the lack of it." He looked at her. "You gave him nothing." "I've had practice." She set down her glass. "Is this going to be a problem?" "I'll handle it." "That's not a full answer." He looked at her, the long, steady look she was learning to interpret as the thing he did when he was deciding something, rather than when he'd already decided. "I will tell you what you need to know," he said. "I will tell you what I can. Marchetti is a complication, not a threat. Not to you. I won't let it become one." She held his gaze. "You said I'll handle it the first time." "I mean it both ways." She exhaled through her nose. It was a sound that communicated both acknowledgement and reservation, which she'd gotten good at producing. "Okay, I'm holding you to that. I expect you to." She looked at the room, the people moving through it, the organized order beneath the apparent ease, the way certain pairs of eyes tracked certain areas of the room in a way that was not casual. She thought about what it meant to be inside this world rather than outside it, and whether inside was better or worse than the accidental proximity that had brought her here. "I need a drink," she said. "A better one." The right thing appeared. It always did. Marchetti's reach came 2 days later, not through any official channel, but through her comment section. A coordinated wave of negative comments on 4 consecutive days, professional and recognizably artificial to anyone who'd spent 3 years watching genuine audience engagement. It was the kind of attack that worked slowly, eroding rather than destroying. Not a single blow, but a sustained vibration. She noticed it on the 2nd day. She said nothing on stream, because she understood by now that this was the kind of fight that was not won publicly. She messaged Dominic. "Someone is running a bot campaign against my channel. About 40% of my recent negative comments have the fingerprints of coordinated posting." His response came in 8 minutes. "I see it. It stops tonight." "How?" "You don't need to know how."
Dominic. A pause. I'm going to counter with our own infrastructure. The algorithm sees coordinated attacks as spam. I'll flag it at the platform level, which we have relationships with, and the comments will self-remove as violating TOS. It'll look like normal moderation. She read this, sat with it. You have relationships with the platforms? I own part of 3 of them. She stared at her phone for a moment. Then she typed, Of course you do. Is that a problem? She thought about it. Then, ask me again when I'm less astonished by the general scale of everything. Fair. The comments stopped on the 3rd day, exactly as he'd said they would. She did not tell her audience. She did not address it. She absorbed it and redirected the way she always had. And the way she always had was now, for the first time, being actively supported by someone else. She had not expected it to feel the way it felt. The thing about slow burns was that they ended. The slowness was the point. The tension accumulated the way snow did, each individual flake unremarkable, the weight of it only becoming apparent when it was already significant. Mia understood this instinctively, the same way she understood pacing in a story. But understanding a thing didn't mean you were in control of when it resolved. It resolved at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in the kitchen of her apartment. He had been there. This was a new development of the past 2 weeks, his presence in her physical space, the apartment that had been exclusively hers being cautiously introduced to another person. He moved through her space with the consideration of someone who understood he was a guest without needing to be told, touching nothing that wasn't offered, but gradually more present. A jacket draped over the chair she'd designated for jackets without saying so. The coffee made correctly. She took hers with oat milk, she hadn't told him, he'd noticed from a stream, when she came out in the morning. Tonight, they'd been talking for 4 hours. It started as the Marchetti situation and became other things, the way conversations did in the small hours, the way defences lowered not through confrontation, but through exhaustion, the careful surfaces softening. He'd told her things, not operational things, or not only those, things about his father, the shape of an inheritance he hadn't asked for and had taken anyway, at 22, with the particular choice of someone who understood that refusing it didn't make it cease to exist. It only meant someone else, less careful, carried it. Things about the 8 months he'd disappeared from the record. He'd spent them in Sicily learning the full scope of what he was heir to, and he'd come back already knowing that he would build the legitimate empire alongside the other one, that the only way through was through. You could have walked away, she said. Not as judgment, she didn't have the luxury of judging this from the outside, just as an observation. To what? He said. The people who depended on the organization wouldn't disappear because I did. The power vacuum would fill with someone worse. He paused. I've told myself that story long enough that I'm not sure anymore how much is true and how much is convenient. She looked at him. This kind of honesty, from him, had the quality of something being offered, the way a very private person extended trust, not with dramatic gestures, but with small ones, the selective unveiling of things they didn't usually say. I think, she said carefully, that both can be true, that the story can be convenient and also correct. You're generous. I'm analytical. It's different. She curled her feet under her on the couch, the unconscious physical adjustment of someone who'd moved past the furniture being deliberate stage. "What do you want?" she asked. "Not the organization, not the empire. You." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Fewer people in the room." She tilted her head. "There are always people in the room," he said. "Always an audience, a team, a set of operational observers. I have 12 people who analyze my behavior for security implications." The smallest pause. "Until very recently, some of them were analyzing yours." "And now?" "Now I've made the room smaller." His eyes were on her. "I'm still learning how to do that." She understood what he was saying, not just in this conversation, in the cumulative shape of the past 3 months, the gradual subtraction of intermediary distance between who he performed as and who he was. "You never had to perform with me," she said. "I know. That's why it's—" a stop. "It's unfamiliar. Being yourself? Being seen," he said. And then, as though the hour and the accumulated weight of the conversation had simply made the usual management insufficient, "I have spent the better part of 2 months being completely unable to think clearly about you. And I've been calling it strategic concern because I'm very good at naming things in ways that make them manageable." She looked at him. The kitchen light was the particular 2 a.m. quality of slightly too honest. Outside, the city was its permanent hum. "Dominic," she said, "I know." "I'm also very good at naming things strategically," she said. "I've been calling it professional curiosity for 3 months." Something changed in his expression, not the performance surface, below it. "Mia, I've been talking to you twice a week for 3 months," she said, "in 2 different formats that turned out to be the same format. And every single time, I walked away thinking about something you said." She held his gaze. "That doesn't happen." "No," he said. "What do we do with that?" He moved across the space between them, not urgently, that wasn't his register, but with the particular deliberateness of someone who has decided something and is not reversing. And his hand came to her jaw, the thumb tracing the angle of it once, carefully, like someone relearning the physical reality of something they'd thought about at a distance for too long. She looked at him. "I'm going to need you to be certain," she said quietly, "because I don't do things by half." "I know," he said. "I've watched 3 years of your content." The almost laugh that had taken her 3 meetings to extract arrived in her fully, and she laughed, and it was the real one, the unguarded one, and he looked at her with the expression of someone receiving something they'd been trying to understand the value of, and were only now getting the denomination right. He kissed her, the way she might have guessed he would, with the total attention of a man who didn't do partial, not rushed, not performed, just present, completely, in the way he brought to everything he decided to commit to. She kissed him back the way she did everything, with her whole self, undivided. Alessandro Marchetti escalated. Mia learned this not from Dominic, who would have managed the information with his usual careful calibration of what she needed to know and when, but from Jamie, who had spent the past 2 months developing an alarming side project of researching everything tangentially related to Mia's current situation, citing journalistic solidarity and refusing to stand down. "He's been reaching out to your brand partners," Jamie said, in the voice she used when she was delivering bad news efficiently. They were in Mia's apartment, and Jamie had a laptop open and a face that suggested the laptop contained things she didn't love. "Vostek gets a pass because it's—" She gestured at the obvious complexity. But the oat milk company got an anonymous email suggesting your content was under investigation for undisclosed conflicts of interest.
Same with the skincare line.
Mia set down her coffee. He's going after my income. He's going after your reputation. The income is incidental. Jamie spun the laptop. The email is sophisticated, not obviously malicious, just the kind of thing that makes a corporate legal team nervous. 2 of your partners have already reached out to ask if there's anything they should be aware of. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what did you tell them? Nothing yet. I said I'd look into it and get back to them this week. Jamie looked at her. Mia, you need to tell me if there is something they should be aware of. There isn't, she said, which was true from her audience's perspective and her partner's perspective. What she had was a relationship with a man whose existence was complicated, and that was not their business unless she chose to make it so. She had done nothing that constituted an undisclosed conflict. Ghost King's donations had been disclosed on stream. The Vostech deal had been properly declared. Tell them it's a coordinated negative campaign from a competitor. Can I say that specifically? You can say that a source with professional rivalries with my current brand partnerships has been targeting my reputation, and that there is no substance to the claims, and that you expect it to resolve. She paused. It will resolve. Are you sure? Yes. She picked up her phone. She messaged Dominic. Marchetti is going after my partners. I need to know what you're doing about it, and I need to know today. He called her. This was new. He texted, emailed, appeared in person. He didn't call. She answered on the second ring. I know about the campaign, he said immediately, without preamble. I found out this morning. It's being addressed. How? The family structure he represents has lines. Targeting a civilian's livelihood as a proxy threat to me is across one of them. I'm calling that in. You're going to have a conversation. I'm going to have several. His voice had the particular quality she'd noticed when she'd asked about something he was genuinely resolved on. Level, unhurried, final. He's overstepped. The men he answers to will agree. And if they don't? They will. This is a business conversation, not a war. Marchetti is ambitious beyond his current standing, which is a common mistake people make at his stage. She thought about this, about the specific grammar of the world he inhabited, the way things resolve through hierarchies and precedent, and the specific currency of who owned what line. She didn't love it. She respected that it was real. This is the part, she said, where my world and your world are genuinely incompatible. Because in my world, when someone comes at my partners, I address it publicly. I know. I'm not going to. I'm not planning to go public with any of this. I'm saying I need to understand that this is being resolved, not just contained. The resolution is being managed as I speak. Dominic. Mia. She exhaled. I hate that I trust you. Why? Because it means I've handed you leverage over me. You told me I wasn't manageable, and then made yourself someone I trust, and now I'm manageable. A pause, then, you are the least manageable person I have ever encountered, he said, with the controlled weight of someone who meant that entirely. And that is not something I'm interested in changing. The something in her chest that had been learning to warm itself at his specific frequency did its thing. Fix it, she said. It's already being fixed. And if it goes further, If he escalates, he won't. He didn't. By the end of the week, the emails stopped. Her partner inquiries received responses they were satisfied with. The coordinated negative campaign, already reduced by Dominic's platform relationships, went fully quiet.
She did not ask for the details of how.
She understood that there were portions of this world she would receive second-hand, at a distance, because the alternative was an involvement she'd made a deliberate choice not to have. She was not inside the operation, she was beside it. The distinction mattered to her, and she'd come to understand it mattered to him that it mattered to her. She addressed it on stream, not directly, not specifically, but in the oblique way she'd always handled complicated personal territory. "I've been thinking about trust," she told the camera, 37,000 viewers in the chat. "About how you give it. About whether you give it to someone because you understand them fully or because you understand them enough.
Because I don't think full understanding is available, really. People are too complicated. You make a decision with the information you have and the character you've read and the pattern of small moments that have accumulated into something you can weigh."
Ghost King sent $2,000 and wrote, "Well said." She looked at the notification and felt the particular warmth of a thing that had changed shape without changing substance. "Thank you, Ghost King," she said, and meant it in more ways than the chat knew. 6 months after the alley. The comment section had an ongoing mythology about Ghost King that had, over the months, evolved into something that resembled fan fiction. There was a subreddit thread that was 73 pages long. The most popular theory, which had been the popular theory for a while now, was that Ghost King and Mia were definitely something. Based on a series of textual analyses the comment section had performed on their on-stream exchanges. The second most popular theory was that Ghost King was going to propose. The third was that he was fictional, constructed by Mia's production team for content. This third theory was dismissed by the serious commenters as unserious. Mia was aware of all of this. She had opinions about it that she kept off camera, which required, at this point, a considerable amount of discipline. She had not told her audience about Dominic. She had not told them about Ghost King's real identity. She had not told them about any of it, which was both easier than it sounded and harder than she'd expected.
She was a person who had built a career on the specific transparency of showing her life in real time, and the thing she was most alive to at the moment was something she was very deliberately keeping private. This felt new, not uncomfortable. Private had been a word she'd almost forgotten the personal meaning of, so thoroughly had she learnt to exist inside the public version of herself. Having something that was only hers felt like recovering a room in a house she'd forgotten she owned. She talked about it with Jamie, who had evolved from "I'm monitoring this very closely" to something resembling enthusiasm, though Jamie would describe it as cautious approval with ongoing risk assessment. "The audience is going to find out eventually," Jamie said. "Maybe," Mia said. They always find out. You've been streaming your life for 3 years. They find the patterns."
"I know." She looked at her phone. On the screen, a message from Dominic. "Dinner tonight. Your choice this time." She wrote back, "My choice is that weird dumpling place in Flushing." His response, "Done." She showed this to Jamie. Jamie read it and said, "He's taking you to Flushing for dumplings. He offered to let me choose. The man has a fleet of cars and a 45-floor view, and he's going to Flushing for dumplings because you want dumplings. Is that
That, Jamie said, with the precision of someone making an argument, is a man who has fallen completely. Mia looked at her phone, at the message exchange, at the pattern of messages in the scroll above it, 3 months of them, growing gradually more personal. The distance of the early months replaced by something that was simply two people in ongoing conversation. "Yeah," she said. "I know." She told her audience on a Thursday, not the full version, not Ghost King, not the alley, not the war room full of operatives watching her streams. She told them the version that was true without being complete. She was seeing someone. She'd kept it private because privacy was a thing she was learning to have. He was not a public person. She was being careful with it. The audience received this the way her audience received personal news she shared carefully, with warmth and with the specific restraint of people who understood that she was sharing what she was choosing to share, and that the rest was hers. One comment among thousands rose to the top of the feed. "Is it Ghost King?" She looked at this comment for a moment. Then she said, "No comment." The comment section exploded. She laughed, the real one, and said, "Okay, moving on." Her phone buzzed. Donation notification, $20,000 from Ghost King _official. No message. She stared at this number, then up at the camera, then back at her phone. "Ghost King," she said, very carefully, with the awareness of 38,000 people watching her choose her words. "That is—" She stopped. "I have nothing." Chat. "She has nothing. She never has nothing. It's him. It's the Ghost King. He's real and he's in love with her and I cannot cope." She put her phone face down. She covered her face with one hand briefly, which was also extremely unusual behaviour and which the audience documented in real time. Then she put her hand down and looked at the camera with the specific expression she made when something was funny and tender and she didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. "Okay," she said. "We're going to talk about something else now." The chat. "We are not going to talk about something else." She talked about something else, but she was smiling for the rest of the stream. Later, in his office, Dominic looked at his phone and the donated amount and thought, too much. He had done the thing he'd told himself he wouldn't do, which was behave like a person in a situation, rather than a person managing one. He put the phone down and picked up the organisational brief he'd been reading before he'd opened the stream. He had read approximately 2 paragraphs when Luca walked in without knocking, which was one of 2 people allowed to do that. "I saw the donation," Luca said. "It was strategic." $20,000 in response to her saying she was seeing someone. It confirmed the Ghost King identity to her audience in a deniable way, which manages the transition from Dominic. He stopped. Luca sat down across from him with the ease of someone who had known you since you were 12 and had exactly one level of patience for self-deception. "You're in love with her," he said, simply and without drama. The room was quiet for a moment. "Yes," Dominic said, equally simple, equally without drama. Luca nodded once. "Then do something about it properly." "I'm working on it." "You've been working on it for 6 months. Some things require a long game." "Some things," Luca said pleasantly, standing, "require you to stop calling them a game." 8 months after an alley in Midtown.
She was doing what she always did, filming a walk. The city was early spring now, the particular quality of March light in New York, when the cold hadn't fully released its grip, but everything smelled like it was thinking about trying. She had 39,000 concurrent viewers and counting. The gimbal was steady in her hand, and the matcha was gone, and she was talking about nothing in the specifically useful way she'd developed for this stretch of walk, where she needed to cover 3 blocks before reaching the interesting location. And I've been thinking about that thing where people say the internet makes you more connected, but less close, and She stopped. Not because of danger, because of him. He was standing outside the bookshop. She had filmed herself walking to this bookshop approximately 40 times in 3 years. It was the one on Bleecker, the one she'd been walking toward the day everything started. He was standing outside it in a dark coat, which was the thing she'd noticed about him first in the conference room. The coat, the quality of someone who inhabited their own gravity. And he was looking at her with the same look she'd been learning to read for 8 months. The chat had noticed the stop. "Who is that? Mia, why did you stop?" She looked at the camera. She looked at him. She made a decision. "Okay," she told 39,000 people. "So, here's a thing I've been keeping private." She turned the camera slightly, not fully toward him, not yet. "I've been seeing someone. I told you that a couple weeks ago, and he is—" She looked at him. He was watching her with the expression she'd started calling his real face, the one under the performance. "He is here, apparently, which he didn't tell me." She heard something behind her, a ripple in the chat she didn't need to read to know was happening. "And I'd like to introduce him to you, but I'm going to ask first because he is not a public person, and he deserves to choose that." She turned the camera fully to her own face, looked at it. "Can I?" She was aware of the chat going absolutely unhinged. She was aware of 39,000 people holding their breath. She turned to him. He looked at her for a moment. He looked at the camera, the small lens of it, the device through which 39,000 people existed simultaneously in this moment. She could see him calibrating, measuring, doing the thing he always did with risk. Then he walked over to her. He stood beside her, close enough that the camera caught them both, and he looked at it with the same steady, unhurried attention he brought to every room he entered. And the chat, which she would later read, produced approximately 4,000 comments in 11 seconds, the top one being, "He's real. The Ghost King is real, and he's beautiful, and I need to lie down." "Hi," she said to the camera. "Hello," he said, beside her. The chat erupted. She laughed. She gestured at him, at the camera, at the general situation. "This is complicated, and I will give you a longer explanation sometime when I have one. Right now, we're going to the bookshop." She looked at him. "We're going to the bookshop, right? That's why you're here?" "You walk here every week," he said. "I wanted to see it." "You could have just told me you were coming." "I wanted to see it without you expecting me." She stared at him. "That's either romantic or—" "You were talking about connection," he said, with the briefest possible edge of the almost laugh she'd been collecting for months. "On stream. I heard it." She turned to the camera. "He listens to my streams," she told 39,000 people. "When I'm live. He just, in the background, apparently, while running a—" She stopped. "While doing his thing. Your content is good," he said, with the blankness of someone delivering an editorial assessment. "Ghost King always said that." "Yes," he said. Chat. It's him! It's the Ghost King! He literally just confirmed it! I am going to pass away!" She looked at the camera. "I know," she told 39,000 people, with the warmth of someone who had been keeping a good secret and was relieved to let some of it go. "I know. Me too." She turned the camera forward as they walked into the bookshop, the familiar bell above the door, the familiar smell of it, the particular quality of this space that she'd filmed 100 times, becoming something different today, just by having him in it. He stopped inside the door and looked around. She filmed him looking, the way he took in the room, the specific attention of it. "What are you looking for?" she asked. He picked up a book from the nearest display. She recognized it. She'd mentioned it on stream 6 weeks ago, the one she'd been thinking about. He turned it over, read the back, set it down, and picked up another. "The one I already said I wanted," she said. He picked it up. He handed it to her. She looked at the book. She looked at him. "You listened to that whole stream," she said. "I listened to all of them," he said, without drama, as though this was simply a statement of fact, which it was. She stood in the bookshop in the March light, with 39,000 people watching, and felt the particular sensation, which she had very little prior experience with, of being completely, unperformatively happy. Not the streamed version of happiness, not the thing she'd learned to produce for the camera, the actual thing, which was quieter and stranger and less photogenic and infinitely more real. She looked at the camera. "Okay," she told her audience, "I'll see you next time." She ended the stream. She put the phone in her pocket and stood in the bookshop with the book in her hands. "You know they're going to lose their minds," she said. "I know. The subreddit is going to be, I can't even imagine." "I imagine it's manageable." The almost laugh. She had a collection of them now, categorized by occasion. This one was the fond variety. She looked at the book. "Thank you for this." "Thank you for—" He stopped, which he rarely did without knowing what came next. She waited, which she was learning to be good at. "For walking out of that alley," he said finally, "at a controlled pace." She looked at him. He was looking back at her with the real face, the one that had taken 8 months to see, but that she now recognized in the same way she recognized voices, by the specific quality of its attention. "That," she said, "is either the most romantic or the most alarming." "I know," he said. She laughed. He didn't quite laugh, but the thing he did was close enough. They stood in the bookshop in the spring light, and outside the city moved in its permanent, enormous way, and somewhere a room full of operatives had the day off, and somewhere a comment section was assembling the narrative in real time, and all of it was true simultaneously. The danger, the warmth, the slowly built thing that had begun with 30,000 people watching a woman walk into the wrong alley and a man decide to catch her instead of contain her. Later, not too much later because patience has an edge even for very patient people, she would look at him across the breakfast table in the apartment that was gradually becoming their apartment and say, "You should have just introduced yourself normally." And he would look up from whatever he was reading, always reading, she'd given up trying to keep pace, and say, "I was managing a containment situation." And now? He would look at her over the top of the page with the expression she'd been collecting for 8 months and say, "Now I'm managing something else." "What?" "A life," he said. Apparently, she would throw a dish towel at him. He would catch it without looking, which was honestly alarming, and set it on the table and go back to reading. And she would sit across from him, and the apartment would be full of the specific, comfortable quiet of two people who had found their register and were living in it. And outside the city would make its city sounds, and 39,000 people would be waiting for the next stream. She would give them the public version. This one, the dish towel, the breakfast table, the way he said, apparently, with the smallest possible warmth at the edge of it, was hers. Some things were hers. She'd learned that. The city kept its secrets. She kept some too, finally. And in the space between what was filmed and what was felt, something real had happened. The kind that didn't need 39,000 witnesses to be true.